Our speaker is Dr. K. Sasirega, Assistant Professor of English, Manuscript College of Arts and Science, Madurai, India. Dr. Sasirega has 20 years of teaching experience and organized the national, international conferences, workshops, and FPPs. Also worked as a chairperson for paper presentations, and Dr. Sasirega working as a language consultant for stylish proofreading and editing, and published papers in 10 international journals, presented 70 papers in conferences, published 2 book chapters, and Dr. Sasirega handled the 17 technical sessions, submitted 3 project proposals, and also a member of ELTAI, Indian Society for Technical Education. And Dr. Sasirega also working as a research supervisor. We are very glad to have you, ma'am. Now I'm handing over the session to you, ma'am. The session is yours.
Good evening, one and all present here. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Audible.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present the title, What is a Review of Literature and How to Write a Review of Literature. And I thank the previous session resource person for highlighting various aspects regarding the entire research process. But my focus is confined towards writing, review of literature, and the mechanics involved inside that. Let me share the screen. Are you able to see my screen?
No, ma'am. Yes,
Is
ma'am.
it not?
Yes, ma'am. We can see.
Yeah. So the topic for the presentation is what is literature review and how to write it. Thanks to the previous resource person on highlighting the various aspects of research process. And this is actually the start point of any research. Literature review is the start point of any research. So we have to begin, and the young researchers must understand why literature review is important. And if I have to define literature review, we could put it this way. It is a study of earlier researchers in respective domain. So irrespective of different fields and studies, research areas, there is going to be an existing research. So when a young researcher wanted to proceed on a particular topic, he or she is expected to start from research reading. So for that research reading, the earlier researchers would be helpful. And with that, we frame our literature review. And there might be a few questions in the mind of young researchers. Why literature review? And the possible points for why literature has been discussed as a part of this presentation. It is to analyze the existing research in a particular domain across the world. See, when it comes to writing a literature review, we depend on 2 different sources, a primary source and a secondary source, and then print journal, and then electronic sources. Whether it is web sources or print sources, what are based on our domain, we have to identify the resources and we have to classify it also. Identification and classification should be a parallel work before writing a literature review. And once the classification is done, and while collecting the resources, we will not confine ourselves to a small boundary. Based on the research topic, we would be checking for the parallel researches carried out across the world. See, we will not limit ourselves in a small domain. We will be really checking for the latest research in our domain across the world. So that is the very first point about why literature review. And it is really to gain knowledge. When I say knowledge, it is not very in a superficial term. What we mean by gain knowledge is gain knowledge again in the research domain. If my domain is English language skills, then my language acquisition, research knowledge acquisition towards that research area. If my language area is nuclear science, then my knowledge is going to be nuclear science itself. So that is the way we mean to gain knowledge over here. And to understand the scope of research, see, unless we read and gain knowledge from the existing literature, we may not understand what is the scope of our research. Sometimes we would be very over ambitious when we start doing our research. So we may not work within the limits. We just work crossing the boundary also. There are chances. So only after reading several existing literature, existing research works, we will come to know what is the scope of our research, whether it requires an exclusive laboratory with the latest equipment, or a new software is required, or the tools involved, like that. We will just come to know different aspects of our research scope. So to gain the scope of research also, we are expected to do a literature review. And always there is going to be a research gap from the existing research works and the work which a researcher he or she has in his or her mind. See, for example, if I have to talk about artificial intelligence in Navy, so the earlier researchers might be about the examples might be submarine and other aspects. And so the forthcoming research should also be a continuation of artificial intelligence in Navy. Yes, and I have given you the keyword submarine. So that it should be connected with the present work. So any work, any research domain has to evaluate the research gap, and as a researcher you have to see how your research work can fit in inside the gap. With that, to fit in the research gap, literature review would be helpful. And from generic to specific, when we have to arrive at a conclusion, when we have to arrive at research realization, we have to narrow down the scope. Narrow down the scope in the sense, I cannot be horizontal with my research work. I have to go vertically towards my in-depth research in my work, in my research area. For that means I have to move from generic to specific. Again, let me take another known example. See, for example, if we are going to talk about the role of robots in medical science, that is going to be a very generic topic. But if I am going to use the role of robots in um, lung operation or in bypass surgery, or if I put it as ophthalmology, then I am bringing it to be very specific. There I am just mentioning it is only for lung surgery or heart bypass surgery or else eye surgery. This is what we mean by the scope has to be narrowed down from generic to specific. If I say the role of robots in medical science, it is going to be generic. When I narrow down the scope, I'd be mentioning as a researcher, I would be able to arrive at a conclusion that role of robots in the field of, in eye surgery or in heart surgery. So heart or eye. So I'm just focusing on one particular organ, and it has become more specific also. And to affirm research direction. And see, in the initial stages, after registering the research, young researchers would be blindfolded at least for a few months. Yes, may not be know what to read, how to collect the material, where to start, how to start. All those confusions are going to be there in our mind. So only after started collecting and reading literatures, earlier literatures, slowly, gradually, eventually, a researcher will develop a research direction. And the continuous, consistent reading practice would ensure the researcher with the proper direction to take up the research, his or her research further. And also reading earlier literature, earlier researchers will help the researcher to identify the research tools to be used for his or her research. And there are few more advantages of doing literature review. We will come to know what are the unsuccessful approaches. See, we don't learn just by success rate, and we don't measure the any research with success rate. We should know what are the attempts failed by the earlier researchers. So from that also we'll pick up a lesson. When we pick up a lesson from the failed attempts, it is a sign for a researcher to avoid, okay, this is an unsuccessful approach. Maybe it might be cost effective, or establishing such infrastructure in your research center may not be possible, or else theoretically your research idea, there might be a mismatch between your research idea and the research application. All these idea generation would be possible when we read earlier literature. And to obtain methodological research inputs, okay, this is the methodology. I'll be doing a quantitative analysis for this particular area, and for this qualitative analysis. Like that, when we read many research articles, we could derive the thought process would be the thought generates more research methodological inputs as well. And as a researcher, we would be understanding, okay, these are the earlier researchers, and this is the way it has been conducted in the past. So this has to be done in my research, so that there is going to be an addition to the earlier research. So to understand that purpose, to understand the earlier researchers and where to continue your research could also be based on the literature review. And apart from that, the earlier presenter were talking about the usage of English language in research writing. So, unless we read several research articles, we cannot develop appropriate vocabulary and technical jargon to write our literature review. So repeatedly when we read repeated technical terms or whatever terms are relevant for your research is getting registered in your vocabulary. So when you start writing, you will be using appropriate, relevant vocabulary and technical terminology throughout your research. And another simple factors, we could easily move from theory to application with the support of literature review. And to rationalize, see, research writing is not a creative writing. There is no space for imagination. There is no space for assumption. It is something, we call it a scientific writing. When it is scientific writing, it should have a clear cut rational thoughts. So I have to, a researcher have to rationalize, and it has to talk about the significance of the problem also. To rationalize the significance of the problem, we really need to depend on literature review. And from how the earlier how the research has been done in the past, and how it is going to be proceeded in the present and in the future, has to be the position of research in different period or over the time will also be decided by reading literature review only. And this slide talks about objective of a literature review. All right, now we got an idea, a kind of rough idea regarding what is literature review and why it is important. Why it is important as a part of a research work. And to answer that question, we are just going to see the objective of a literature review. It is to demonstrate that you have read and comprehend. See, this is the chapter where you are giving assurance to two stakeholders. One is to your supervisor, and the other one is to the audience or to the readers, that you have read a lot about earlier researchers, you understood it clearly, and with that strong foundation, you have started your research. So then there is a space for you to display your research, in-depth research. For that, we have to depend on literature review. And it is to develop good understanding about the published works in your area of research. See, for literature review, we depend on earlier published works. So that would another clue for the community to understand these are the earlier published works in the particular research area. Sometime the earlier published works may be limited. So we may find it difficult to collect secondary sources. So your research guide, the readers who read your research article or a thesis will understand, oh, this is a very latest work. No existing literature review available. Hence, with the uh, uh, available source, the researcher has done this work. So these kind of understanding and these kind of connection could be possible between the reader, between the researcher and the guide. Researcher and the audience can be developed. That is also one of the objective I wanted to highlight over here in literature review. And another thing is, as we imagine, or as researcher, as we cannot simply think that literature review is a summary of information or summary of notes based on the earlier researchers. It is not at all that way. See, it is a as a researcher, you would have extracted what is required for your research, and that would be presented in the form of literature review. So it cannot be treated as a simple summary or just a kind of paraphrasing or notes That is not the role of a literature review. And it is a critical review on the earlier researchers in your domain. And again, any scientific writing available in your domain has to be critically reviewed. And for that, the authentic source is earlier literature only. And the next slide, what we are going to see is how we are moving from a process of reading, research reading, to research writing. Though I named this slide as reading to writing, what I intend over here is research reading to research writing. So the process of reading, that will not be a very for a short period. It will be there for over a time, and it would be a kind of a continuous process. Simultaneously, the writing process would also be a lengthy process and a simultaneous process. It is not two different approaches. Research reading to research writing is an integrated approach. So meticulous study of an existing researchers should undergo a process of literature review. So the facts, what we should know about literature review is, this is the chapter to begin with for any dissertation writing. See, uh, 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 the research, the dissertation based on our topic is going to be divided into different chapters. And as a researcher, we must know that we will not start writing from chapter 1. We start writing from literature review only. So that's why I said from reading to straight writing. So that you read, and so much of information has been stored in a memory that has to be transferred in the form of a documentation. For that, an exclusive chapter has been devoted in your whole thesis, that is literature review. Mostly that is going to be chapter 2. So this is where we start our research writing process itself. That's why it has been uh, given over here as a chapter to begin with. And it can stand alone as a separate research article, because that is a taxonomy of many research articles. Hence, the research literature review can, that chapter can alone stand as a research article. See, it is not possible with third chapter, fourth chapter, or first chapter. That will not stand individually as a kind of a separate work. But whereas literature review can stand alone as a separate research article. And again, it talks about background knowledge required. And the, the continuous reading would generate more writing ideas to a researcher. And the background knowledge, that what we gained from research reading, would act as a kind of a roadmap for the present and the future study of the researcher. And above all, it serves as a self-research reference resource. See, and when something gets struck with your writing, you would go back to the particular reference. So it is a self-research reference resource. That's why we depend on literature review. All right. So let me assume this way. You're convinced that literature review is a part of, is a major component of your research. And this is the start point of your research. Now, the next step as a researcher, what you should know about literature review chapter is its physical structure. When I say the physical structure, the components involved over here is three major components. It is introduction and development of ideas and conclusion. It's a very simple and neat structure. Just introduction, development of ideas, that we call it as body, and conclusion. All right, quickly let's see what are we going to present in the introduction part. See, there we are going to mention the focus and purpose of the literature review with the with my research topic, and what is my research scope. That is going to be given in the part of introduction. So the existing researchers and how it has been connected with my domain, with my research, and what is my research scope. That will serve as a kind of introduction. And the following ideas are going to formulate the body of the structure, and it is going to be a critical evaluation at every stage. And see, the development of idea could be arranged in four possible ways. One is chronological order, the other one is thematic arrangement, or it could be methodological arrangement or theoretical arrangement also. All these words are self-explanatory. Still, I just give a little information over here. Chronological in the sense which talks about timeline entries. So you would trace your research development over a period of time. So if you present your idea, your research idea stage by stage, yes, then it is going to be a chronological development. That could be reverse chronological order also. From latest, you would move to the earlier work. That also possible. And the other way of writing, forming the structure of literature review is thematic arrangement. Thematic arrangement in the sense, the central themes, it will not be chronological movement. It is going to be theme wise. The central themes, how you could organize your discussion of your topic around central themes. See, for example, on digital marketing, if the theme is digital marketing, then the development of ideas would be digital marketing, then online shopping, online transaction. It goes that way only. There, we will not think of producing our ideas in a chronological way. The digital marketing, under that, we would be talking about online shopping, online booking, and online transaction, all those things. This is what we mean by thematic arrangement. Then methodological approaches. It varies from subject to subject. Yes. See, as a language teacher, if I want to do some experiment on listening part, the teacher may be using audio lingual method. So how the other methods involved in developing language skills, if I proceed my research in that way, that we call it as methodological approaches. Then theoretical, it is very simple. The theoretical perspectives, how the theory supports your research, and if it has been developed as a kind of body, then we call it as theoretical structure. So the development of ideas for literature review could take in four classification, namely chronological, thematic, methodological, and theoretical. Chronological could further be reverse chronology also, and thematic, the example given would make you to understand what is thematic, the digital marketing. So under digital marketing, the different themes involved is online shopping, online website selling, and online transaction, those things. And methodological, the example given over here is audio lingual method used for language enhancement. Then what are the other methods? It could be computer assisted or mobile assisted. Those are all different methodologies. So that is the example given over there. And theoretical, it is going to be entirely different for each and every domain. But if you use a particular theory to support your research, then we call it as theoretical development. And the final part of literature review is going to be conclusion. And there, as a researcher, we are expected to summarize the key findings and how, and along with the key findings, you are expected to emphasize on how your research is going to play a role over there. This is the way we are expected to structure the literature review chapter. And all right, now let's see the second part of this session, that is how to write literature review. All right, now it's clear that literature review is the major component and it is so important, and it starts from reading to writing. All these things are, now it's clear. Now we come to the application part of writing literature review. When it comes to writing literature review, and we should understand there is a role for manuscript writing. It is not just a copy paste kind of job. And research ethics is to be involved over here. And uh, what is expected from a researcher is spending time to read and write on the own. And the simple thing to begin the literature review is begin with the statement purpose. Statement purpose in the sense of on what basis the literature review has been done, and how the chapter is going to enlighten the reader or enlighten the research. So with that statement purpose only, we have to start the literature review. And based on your domain, you could check for examples for the statement purpose of a review in web sources as well as in print sources. Then you have to define your research focus. In when it comes to a writing part, your research focus has to be clearly given. See, and it has to be developed as 4 or 5 paragraphs. These are the earlier research, and this is the present research, and this is the connect point. All these details have to be written in literature review. And highlight the main issues, state the background of your study, which means whether it is experiment based or a market based or field work based. What is the background of your study? That has to be mentioned, and how it is to be connected with your work. These are all the points which you have to consider while writing the literature review. All right. We cannot deal all these nuances of writing part in detail, but definitely these simple tips will ensure smooth writing part. See, when you write sentences, when you generate sentences, when you frame sentences, use connecting words. Most importantly, when it is literature review, we have to connect our idea with the earlier researcher's idea. So these connecting words, what are given over here, will help you to ensure readability in your research work. Unless there is no ambiguity, it is easy for us to understand. These simple words will ensure readability in to your literature review. To make you understand, I used the word connecting words. Actually, technically speaking, that we call it as linkers or signpost. So the words listed over here, like however, in light of, nevertheless, nonetheless, contrary to, on the other hand, in addition to, additionally, of equal importance, further, furthermore, All these would act as a kind of connecting words. And when we use any one of these words appropriately in our sentence framing, that will ensure the uh, readability to our research article. And along with these connecting words, the other important component, other important writing element to be used is using reporting verbs. Let's understand what is a reporting verbs. So the example is given in the following slide, and it is used, reporting verbs are nothing but which is used to introduce references, and it can be used to indicate your personal research point or other researchers viewpoint. And the idea of using variety of reporting verbs is to engage the readers meaningfully. And this also another reporting verbs, when we used it in our writing, it will ensure smooth reading and smooth understanding for the reading community. And here are the examples for uh, reporting verbs. Suggest that, insists that, shows that, defines that, outlines that, finds that, climbs that, etc. There are many reporting verbs, but when we should know how fittingly these reporting verbs to be used in different places instead of repeating a same set of words. Yes, any of these reporting verbs could be used to ensure the language proficiency, and this would definitely smoothen the reading process and understanding process as well. And this is going to be a final slide of this presentation. Once you complete reading and writing the literature review, this is the checklist as a researcher everyone should have in your planner or in your journal. Have you stated the reasons for doing your literature review? So, once after writing the literature review, there shouldn't be any ambiguity. As a researcher, you should get personally convinced that you have covered all the necessary points for your research. And so you have to cross check that whether all the reasons relevant for your research has been stated clearly in your literature review or not. And these 5 pointers will really going to be useful to ensure the literature review has been consistently developed to a neat structure. And you should know, as a researcher, you should know and understand that your work within your reasonable boundaries. Earlier itself, I just mentioned about some experiments may be cost effective, may be expensive. The material, maybe the strike material cannot be used for a research purpose unless we are supported or sponsored by some agencies. Sometime cost, time consuming, some certain researches may be time consuming. See, for example, if your research is on wildlife, you cannot fix work towards a timeline, because it will, the nature of the research itself is time consuming. That's why we are talking about whether you worked within reasonable boundaries. uh, that also has to be checked. Then have you emphasized recent developments? See, if it is a banking, if it is a research on banking sector, now it has evolved different stages, and the very latest development, recent development in banking sector is mobile app, and app GPay transaction, online transaction, phone pay transactions, so mobile app transactions. So when I talk about banking sector, I should emphasize the recent developments in banking sector. When I talk about language acquisition, English language acquisition of college students, I should talk about ICT tools. That is the latest development and the sources you used to acknowledge your literature review, to frame your literature review, whether that is credible source. That's why earlier I mentioned about culling out information in 2 points. One is from primary source and another one is from secondary source. Whether it is a primary source or a secondary source, it should be from an authenticated textbook or from the authenticated website. And the source to be verified before we bring it to our literature review. Whether you have consistency in the sense they shouldn't, idea clarity should be there. Research idea clarity should be there, consistently present throughout your literature review. And this is what I feel a checklist for your literature review. And this is where I wanted to end up the presentation on what is a review of literature and how to write it. And let me stop my presentation and thanks for listening. Now it is open, the floor is open to uh, ask questions.
Ma'am, very good evening. May I?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm Divya Hariharan. I'm from Cochin. Ma'am, you had spoken about the body part of the literature review, wherein you have like mentioned the chronological order, thematic, and then theoretical part and things like that, ma'am. Ma'am,
Yes.
I just have a question, ma'am. Can we use two, like the chronological as well as the thematic or the theoretical part, like two things together and then write?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
See, there is no hard and fast rules as far as research writing is concerned. If your domain, may I know your research area, ma'am?
Ma'am, actually, I'm just submitted my research proposal, ma'am. So when I did that, it was like a very brief, and then I didn't know how to do it. But then, right now, like after listening to your talk, ma'am, thank you very much. It was really very, very, very informative, ma'am. A lot of
Thank
things I
you.
could get it, ma'am, from your talk, ma'am. And then, so that's the reason, ma'am. I just wanted to know because I just want to correct it, ma'am.
That's
According to
okay. Maybe if you say your research domain, like what is that, medicine or law, something like that, if you
ELT, ma'am. ELT.
ELT.
Yes, ma'am.
So, see, definitely you could use both the approaches.
Okay,
You
ma'am.
could,
And for
yes.
ma'am, and for a research proposal, ma'am, what would you suggest, ma'am? How many pages should it be? Because Hardeep sir in the previous talk, he said it should be like he was more focused on the research paper rather than a research proposal. So I have not I am not into that as of now. So I'm just writing the research proposal. So I'm just in the beginner stage. So in that case, like how many pages would you suggest? Like would that like my domain being the being ELT? Uh,
See, uh, actually, my field is also English language teaching only. I did my, excuse me, my research is also on syllabus redesigning in ELT area only. And when it comes to research proposal, it is going to be the miniature of our research work. Yes, and if it is ELT, I would say it could run around 10 to 15 pages. And again, it varies from university to university, and topic difference should also be there. If you
okay.
are going to specifically work on listening or speaking or all the four skills, there are several factors to be considered when we talk about word limit or page limit. But
Okay.
roughly, we could conclude that it need not be beyond 15 pages.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, the only literature review, ma'am, you're talking about. Is that right?
No, you were asking about research proposal, right?
Ma'am. So
I'm
the
just answering for that question. Yes.
so it should be like it depends upon the university, and the whole research proposal should be around like 15 to 20 pages. Correct?
No, no, no,
Only the
no.
literature review part.
You mean to ask the dissertation, the entire dissertation, the page count for dissertation copy?
Yes, ma'am.
It has to be more than 250. We'll
Okay.
be writing 7 chapters at least.
Okay.
Yes, if not
Yes,
7 chapters, at least 5 chapters.
yes, ma'am.
So naturally, each chapter we would devote around 50 pages, 40 to 50 pages. So then including references and other requirements, it may go up to 250 pages.
Okay. And ma'am, when we do the literature review, like we will definitely be looking into the research work that has been done by the previous researchers. So,
Yes.
will that be wrong if I say that I can, like when they give the references, like it would definitely help me in going through their work as well. So, I can do that also.
You are allowed, but you must know how to acknowledge the sources you have used.
Okay.
Yes, otherwise, the earlier presenter hinted very clearly it may lead to plagiarism.
Okay.
So, but a very right question as a beginner in this field, you must know how to give references and how to acknowledge the sources you have used in your research writing throughout the research. So maybe the follow somewhere you could self-learn about how to give references or how to go about acknowledging the sources we use.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, that you have to develop little more knowledge towards that.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Congratulations and my best wishes for early completion of your research work.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Welcome, welcome,
Very good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, may I?
welcome.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your informative session, ma'am. I just
Yes, ma'am.
want to ask one question, ma'am. We started with the analyzing the research material, the one which were published earlier, and then we start writing a research paper. Ma'am, I just
Yes.
want to know what if we just plan out to write a research paper on a new topic, like the one we go through newspapers and we go through many articles on social media platforms also. And if we choose a topic from that platform and we want to write a research paper on that and we want to conduct our own research, then, ma'am, how should we mention the references in that case?
Uh, See, maybe with an example, I think I could explain
Okay,
your
ma'am, I
to
want to
answer your
say,
question.
ma'am, I'm just asking, like nowadays when people were at home during lockdown, and there were many issues, they were increased screen time, and that increased screen time led to many psychological issues and some sort of sleep disturbances also. And a term was coined, corona somnia, in that phase. When I was looking for research papers regarding corona somnia, I could not find anything on PubMed or Google Scholar on those platforms. And even I was planning to write a paper on that. So I am a bit confused that how should I put up the references? Should I use the newspaper articles to write my news research paper?
Yes, I could answer your question in two possible way.
Okay.
Definitely, newspaper resource is a credible source to be included in a research article.
Okay.
Definitely, that is an authenticated documentation. So you need not worry about it. And
Okay.
you were talking about two keywords. One is COVID period.
Yes.
Yes. Other
Yes.
one is insomnia developed due to screen time. Am I
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So your literature survey could be on screen time.
Okay.
Yes, screen time. How do we develop screen time? Spend more time towards the screen time. We find the no work during the lockdown period.
During the lockdown.
Yes, sir. So it is interrelated. COVID. See,
Um,
yes. So
okay, ma'am. Ma'am, my only issue is like the new term was invented. That was chronosomnia. And when I was looking for this term, I could not find out any paper.
see, maybe this is another information. The word is a kind of a combination of corona and
And
insomnia, a portmanteau. Yes, a combination of two things that we call it as portmanteau. So see, it is actually you wanted to talk about insomnia in your research article.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
maybe the period what you have taken for your research study is corona period.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't think you could easily correlate it with the corona period, online, the screen time, and then insomnia is the outcome, and how
Okay.
it has affected. I guess literature reviews, the early researchers would be possible on all these things. And
Okay.
one more insight I would like to give.
Yes, ma'am.
When we want to collect information for our research, instead of checking resources in Google, check it in Google Scholar. Yes.
Yes,
uh,
ma'am.
yes, maybe new combination of words, this online screen time and insomnia. That is one way of trying to collect information from Google Scholar. Instead of trying in Google, you just try it in Google Scholar.
Ma'am,
um,
I tried that time. Ma'am, only one more query. If we see some articles on Google directly, and then also we want to choose that specific keyword for our research purpose, for research paper, can we go with that?
Come again, huh?
Ma'am, my point is if we see some articles on Google and we
Yes,
want to use some information from that specific article, can we use that information in that research paper and can we use those references also?
definitely. Definitely, what's wrong in using the same reference? The only thing is, it should not be an entire copy paste kind of work.
Okay.
You just read it, you understood it, and you are going to fit into your research work with the proper kind of acknowledgement and by citing the particular reference. So that is the way we carry out our research. See, no
uh,
research is going to be from a new in a new way. There is no innovation in the field of research is concerned. We have to start from the early researchers only. So I guess definitely you could do that.
Because, ma'am, I was a bit confused because somebody guided me in the sense that we should not use those articles or newspaper articles for writing a research paper.
I,
So,
no, see, may I know your domain, ma'am?
ma'am, mine is in life sciences and it's part of physiotherapy.
All right. So maybe it will come under medicine.
Yes, ma'am.
You just check for, see, if it is language related, we depend on for referencing, and other thing we depend on MLA format and APA format. Like that, there must be some standardized format for your references also. If you check that, you will come to know that you are very well allowed to use newspaper articles as an authenticated sources.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
My pleasure, ma'am.
ma'am, can I ask you one more question, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
Divya again, ma'am. Actually, right now, Dr. Bharti, she spoke about this insomnia. So, ma'am, can she go and like find out this synonym for this insomnia, like sleeplessness or something like that, in Google Scholar, so that she can get more articles? Like, I don't know whether this would work or not, but then in order when she said that it's a new area and she couldn't get enough material in Google. So when you said to use Google Scholar instead of Google, and then we can always like find more articles or more information when we are not looking out for a specific word like insomnia. We know that the meaning could be like sleeplessness. So if we are putting sleeplessness as a word, and then that is also possible, right, ma'am?
Yes, very valid, very valid. It is another dimension. Instead of using the straight technical word, we could check for synonyms also when we want to collect information regarding our research area. That's very
Okay.
valid, Divya.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.